The fluorescent lights in the executive conference room felt colder than usual that Tuesday morning. My hands rested flat on the mahogany table, steady despite the pounding in my chest. Across from me sat our new chief information officer, his expensive suit pressed to perfection, his expression radiating the kind of confidence that comes from never having been truly tested. "Fiona, your services are no longer required," he said, sliding a manila folder across the table. "Frankly, your logic is ancient junk. This company needs to move into the 21st century, and you're clearly stuck in the past." Ancient junk, 23 years of my life reduced to those two words. What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known, was that embedded in every licensing agreement I'd written, every contract I'd negotiated, every piece of proprietary software architecture I'd designed, was a single, ironclad clause. The code expires if I am terminated without a board vote. 4 days later, the company received an invoice, $4.1 million, and their entire operational system went dark at midnight on Friday. Before we dive into how everything unfolded, a quick word. If stories about standing your ground, protecting your work, and watching karma do its thing resonate with you, hitting that subscribe button would mean the world. This channel is on a journey to reach 5,000 subscribers, folks who appreciate real stories about real situations. Now, let me tell you exactly how we got here. My name is Fiona Catherine Walsh, and for 23 years, I served as the Senior Systems Architect and Director of Technology Infrastructure at Hartwell Manufacturing Solutions, a mid-sized automotive parts supplier based in Columbus, Ohio. I grew up in a small apartment above my parents' diner in Youngstown. My father worked the morning shift at the steel mill before coming home to flip burgers. My mother waitressed double shifts on weekends. They couldn't afford to send me to college, but they taught me something more valuable. They taught me to see people. Really see them. The single mother working 2 jobs, the veteran struggling with injuries, the immigrant family trying to build something from nothing. Empathy wasn't just a word in our household, it was a way of life. That understanding became my superpower in the tech world. Technology isn't just about code and systems. It's about the warehouse worker who needs the inventory system to be intuitive after a 12-hour shift. It's about the accountant who's terrified of computers but needs to run payroll every other Friday. It's about building something that serves everyone, not just the executives in their corner offices. That philosophy guided every decision I made at Hartwell. And ultimately, the year was 1999, and the world was losing its mind over IT 1000. Hartwell Manufacturing's entire infrastructure was a patchwork of outdated systems threatening to collapse. I was 31 years old, working as a mid-level systems analyst at a consulting firm in Cleveland when Hartwell brought us in to assess the damage. I spent 3 weeks in their server room, tracing cables, reading documentation, interviewing everyone who touched a computer. What I discovered was worse than they'd feared, but I also saw potential. Buried underneath those failing systems was a solid foundation. Good people, quality products, loyal customers. They just needed infrastructure that could carry them into the future. I submitted a proposal that my boss called career suicide. Instead of recommending expensive third-party vendors, I proposed leaving the consulting firm to build them a custom solution from the ground up. In exchange, I wanted equity, a seat at the table when technology decisions were made, and complete autonomy. The CEO, Raymond Hartwell, grandson of the company's founder, looked at me over his reading glasses. "You're asking us to bet the entire company on you." "No, sir," I replied. "I'm asking to bet my entire career on this company." He shook my hand. We had a deal. The next 2 years were 18-hour days and problem-solving that either breaks you or makes you. I designed every system from scratch, never forgetting what my parents taught me. Every decision was made with the end user in mind. And the licensing agreements, those were my insurance policy. I'd seen too many talented people build something incredible only to watch a company sell it out from under them. So every piece of proprietary code I wrote was licensed to Hartwell Manufacturing under very specific terms. The company had unlimited use as long as I remained an employee in good standing. If I left voluntarily, they had perpetual licenses at no cost. But if I was terminated without cause, defined as termination without a 2/3 vote of the board of directors, all licenses would expire immediately, and the company would need to negotiate new terms at fair market value. Raymond Hartwell read every word. His attorney read them. Everyone understood exactly what they were signing, and everyone agreed it was fair. For 20 years, it was never an issue. The systems I built carried Hartwell Manufacturing through the dot-com boom, the 2008 recession, and rapid technological changes. The company grew from 200 employees to over 800. Revenue tripled. We expanded into 3 new states. Raymond retired in 2015, handing the company over to his daughter, Elizabeth. She understood the company in her bones, having worked through every department. The transition was seamless. Then Elizabeth got sick. Pancreatic cancer, diagnosed in March of 2021. She fought for 18 months, but by September of 2022, she needed to step back. The board began searching for a new CEO, someone from outside the family, for the first time in 70 years. They hired Nathaniel Blackwood in November of 2022. He came from a large corporate background, lots of buzzwords about disruption and innovation. The board, exhausted from 2 years of strain, was seduced by his resume. I met him on his first day. He walked past my extended. Nathaniel Blackwood's first 3 months were corporate upheaval. He brought in consultants to validate decisions he'd already made. He restructured departments, eliminated positions, and hired new executives from his previous companies. In February of 2023, he announced his biggest move. Hartwell was hiring a chief information officer. I, along with my entire department, would report to this new CIO. For 2 decades, I'd had a seat at the table. Suddenly, I wasn't even in the room. The new CIO arrived in March. Lloyd Hutchinson was everything I'd learned to be wary of. Mid-40s, impeccably dressed, armed with an MBA and vocabulary filled with legacy systems, technical debt, and digital transformation. Our first meeting was in his corner office, Elizabeth's old office. He sat behind his desk, tapping on his laptop while I stood, uninvited to sit. "Fiona," he said without looking up, "I've been reviewing our infrastructure. It's exactly what I expected, a patchwork of old systems held together by someone who's been here too long to see how far behind we've fallen." "Our systems are customized for our operational needs," I said, keeping my voice level. "Uptime over 99.8% for the past 5 years, user satisfaction consistently above 90%, and total cost of ownership 40% below industry average." He finally looked up. "Those metrics are meaningless if the underlying technology is obsolete. I've already begun conversations with enterprise solution providers. We'll be migrating to cloud-based, industry-standard platforms. Your custom code will be phased out entirely." "Lloyd, those platforms are designed for huge corporations with standardized processes. Our competitive advantage has always been flexibility. The systems I've built enable that." He smiled without warmth. "Fiona, you're thinking like a coder, not a strategist. This company needs modern solutions, not someone's personal project. I suggest you focus on documenting your systems for the transition team. That's your primary responsibility now." After 23 years of architecture and leadership, I was being reassigned to write manuals for my own replacement. Over the next months, I watched Lloyd dismantle everything I'd built. He hired contract developers and brought in software vendors. My team started looking to me for guidance. "What do we do, Fiona?" asked Thomas, one of my senior developers who'd started as an intern 10 years earlier. "We do our jobs," I told him. "We maintain the systems, serve the users, and document everything Lloyd asks us to document, with absolute precision and complete honesty." I documented everything. Every function, every integration, every piece of logic. I explained not just what the code did, but why it was designed that way and what the risks would be of replacing it. In June, Lloyd presented his technology modernization plan to the board. $8.7 million over 3 years. Beautiful presentation, promises of efficiency and reduced costs. I wasn't invited. The board approved the plan. The first casualty was my team. In July, Lloyd announced a restructuring. Contract developers would take over. My team would be transitioned to support roles or offered severance. Thomas came to my office with tears in his eyes. They're offering me 6-month severance. Fiona, I've been here for 10 years. I couldn't save their jobs. By August, 7 of my 12 In September, the problems began. Reports running slower, system errors, features that used to work smoothly suddenly requiring multiple steps. The contracted developers would fix one issue and create 2 more, not from incompetence, but from ignorance. Lloyd's attitude toward me shifted from dismissive to openly hostile. In meetings, he would interrupt me, contradict my assessments, and make jokes about ancient history and legacy thinking. In October, the first major failure occurred. The integration between our inventory system and shipping platform collapsed during our busiest week. Orders were placed, parts were pulled, but the shipping system had no record. Trucks sat idle, while warehouse workers scrambled with paper printouts. The contracted developers worked 3 days to fix it. The new integration was slower, required manual verification, and lost several automated features. I wrote a detailed report explaining what went wrong and offering solutions. Lloyd deleted it without reading it. "The problem is fixed," he said. "We don't need to waste time on what caused it. We need to move forward." The migration plan was accelerating. Lloyd convinced Nathaniel that current problems proved my legacy systems were failing. The 3-year timeline was now 18 months. The company was hemorrhaging money. Contracted developers were expensive. Enterprise software licenses were expensive. Training was expensive. And all while operational efficiency declined and customer satisfaction dropped. In December, Elizabeth Hartwell passed away. She was 61, a brilliant businesswoman who had carried her father's legacy with grace. I sat in the back of her memorial service, crying for the loss of a leader who understood that technology should serve people. With Elizabeth gone, there was no one left who remembered the early days, who understood the philosophy behind what we'd built. In January of 2024, Lloyd announced the first phase rollout would begin in March. The entire manufacturing operations suite would be migrated to the new cloud-based platform. My custom systems would be shut down. I requested a meeting with Lloyd. He kept me waiting 45 minutes, then gave me 10 minutes, checking his phone throughout. "The decision is made, Fiona. I'm asking you to understand the risks. If the migration goes wrong, we're talking about production lines shutting down, orders not being fulfilled, revenue loss that could threaten the entire company." He looked at me with pity. "Fiona, I know change is scary, especially for someone who's been doing the same thing for so long, but I've overseen migrations like this at companies 3 times Hartwell's size. This is routine work for professionals." The migration was scheduled for the first weekend in March. I offered to help. Lloyd declined. "We have professionals handling this. We don't need legacy thinking slowing down the process." That Friday evening, I sat in my office as my systems were shut down for the last time. 23 years of work offline. Monday morning, I arrived at 6:30. The parking lot was already full. Inside, the office was chaos. The new system had launched technically. It was running, but it didn't work, not in any meaningful sense. Production scheduling couldn't handle custom client orders. Inventory management couldn't track parts across multiple locations. Quality control had no way to handle our specific protocols. Margaret, our head of production scheduling, found me at 7:15. She was 63, had been with Hartwell for 37 years. She looked like she'd aged 5 years overnight. "Fiona, we have 3 production lines down. We have orders due to ship today that the system shows as not started. We have inventory the system says we don't have. This is a catastrophe." "Where's Lloyd?" "His assistant says he's working from home, not to be disturbed unless it's an emergency." I spent that Monday helping people. I couldn't access the old systems or fix the new ones, but I could help with workarounds and temporary manual processes. By week's end, the migration was clearly a failure. Production efficiency had dropped 40%, Order fulfillment time had doubled. Customer complaints had tripled. Lloyd blamed the users. In a company-wide email, he stated the transition period was challenging because staff were resistant to change and not sufficiently trained. March turned into April. The crisis settled into grinding inefficiency. Workarounds became standard. Manual processes replaced automated ones. Things that took minutes now took hours. In May, Nathaniel finally started asking questions. The quarterly earnings were disastrous, the first loss in over 15 years. The board was asking questions. Major customers were expressing concerns. Instead of acknowledging the failed migration, the meeting was scheduled for Tuesday, May 14th at 9 a.m. Employment discussion, Fiona Walsh. I dressed carefully that morning. If this was the end, I'd face it with dignity. Nathaniel sat at the head of the table, Lloyd to his right, Catherine from HR across from them. No one offered me coffee. Nathaniel spoke first. Fiona, we need to make some difficult decisions. Lloyd has concerns about your ability to adapt, and frankly, the board is asking tough questions about IT performance. Lloyd leaned forward. Your resistance to modernization has been a consistent obstacle. The old systems you built were inflexible and outdated, which is why the migration has been more challenging than it should have been. We need team members committed to innovation, not people clinging to legacy approaches. Lloyd, the migration has been challenging because the new systems weren't designed for our operational needs. I documented those needs. I offered to help. I was told my input wasn't needed. Your input was outdated, he snapped. This company was running on ancient junk held together by logic that might have made sense 20 years ago, but is completely obsolete now. Ancient junk, there it was. Nathaniel raised a hand. Fiona, we're terminating your employment effective immediately. Catherine has prepared your severance package, 6 months' salary, health benefits, standard provisions. Catherine slid a folder across the table. I looked at the folder but didn't open it. This termination, has it been approved by the board of directors? Nathaniel frowned. That's not necessary. This is an operational decision within the CEO's authority. I'm asking specifically about a board vote, 2/3 majority, voting to approve my termination. Lloyd laughed. We don't need board approval to make a staffing change. I nodded slowly. Then let me be clear. My employment contract contains specific provisions regarding the proprietary systems I developed. Those systems are licensed to Hartwell Manufacturing under terms that remain in effect as long as I am employed, or if I depart voluntarily, or if I am terminated with cause following a 2/3 vote of the board. The room went quiet. If I am terminated without such a vote, I continued, all licenses for my proprietary code revert to me personally. The company would need to negotiate new licensing terms. Nathaniel's face went from annoyed to concerned. Any code you wrote as an employee belongs to the company. That's standard employment law. Generic code, yes. But I wrote proprietary systems under specific licensing agreements negotiated and signed by Raymond Hartwell, reviewed by legal counsel, and incorporated into my employment contracts. Catherine flipped through folders, looking worried. I don't have any record of such agreements. They're technology licensing agreements filed with legal contracts. Raymond Hartwell kept copies. Elizabeth had copies. Check the contract archives. Lloyd turned red. You can't hold the company's systems hostage. I'm not holding anything hostage. I'm explaining the legal terms under which those systems were created. You're welcome to review the contracts. But the next 3 days, Catherine tore apart the archives and located the original agreements. The company's attorney reviewed them. Nathaniel and Lloyd had multiple closed-door meetings. I continued to work and waited. Friday afternoon, Catherine called me. The attorneys confirmed your licensing agreements are valid and enforceable. Nathaniel and Lloyd want to know if you would renegotiate the terms. What are they proposing? They want you to accept termination in exchange for a larger severance and a consulting agreement while they develop alternatives. No, I said. The terms are clear. If the board votes with a 2/3 majority to terminate me, I'll leave with standard severance, and all licenses remain in effect. If I'm terminated without that vote, the licenses expire, and the company can negotiate new terms. They won't bring this to the board. Nathaniel sees it as undermining his authority. That's not my problem. I'm simply holding the company to agreements they signed. Monday, Nathaniel called a special board meeting. A board member called me that evening. Fiona, Nathaniel presented your situation. He recommended we vote to approve your termination to avoid legal complications. He and Lloyd explained you were resistant to changes, that your systems were hindering progress. What did the board decide? 3 voted to approve, 7 voted against. We've watched this disaster unfold. We've seen the financial reports, the customer complaints. Several of us worked with Raymond and Elizabeth for decades. We know whose systems were actually working. I felt tension loosen in my chest. Thank you. Thank Nathaniel for forcing the issue. He thought we'd rubber stamp his decision. Instead, he gave us an... Tuesday morning, I received an email from Nathaniel stating that after consultation with the board, he had decided to defer any personnel changes pending completion of the technology transition. Lloyd didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. When we finally interacted, he looked at me with pure hatred. The damage was done. In June, 2 major customers moved their business to competitors. In September, Lloyd resigned, given a choice between resigning with severance or being terminated for cause. Nathaniel appointed Helen Cartwright, VP of Operations, as interim CIO. Her first conversation with me was refreshingly honest. Fiona, I'm not a technology expert. I'm operations. What I know is our systems are a mess, we're spending money we don't have, and we need to stabilize quickly. I'd like your honest assessment of where we are and what it would take to fix it. Finally, someone asking the right questions. I prepared a comprehensive analysis. The ideal solution was a hybrid approach. Restore some critical custom systems the enterprise software couldn't replicate, integrate them with new platforms where appropriate, and rebuild an internal team. Helen presented my recommendations to the board in October. They approved a modified strategy incorporating many of my suggestions. It should have been a victory, but some damage can't be undone. The talented team I'd built was gone. Customer relationships would take years to repair, and my relationship with the company had fundamentally changed. I was no longer Fiona, the architect who'd built something great. I was Fiona, the employee who couldn't be fired because of legal agreements. In November, I made my decision. I'm resigning, I told Helen and Nathaniel. Effective January 1st, 2025, that gives you 2 months to prepare. Helen looked genuinely sad. Fiona, we need you. The company needs stable systems and competent leadership. I can help establish both before I leave, but I can't stay. Nathaniel leaned back. If you resign, the licensing agreements remain in effect, correct? Of course, that was his concern. Yes, I said. If I leave voluntarily, all licenses remain in perpetual effect at no cost. My last 2 months were bittersweet. I documented everything. I worked with Helen on a realistic strategy. I interviewed candidates, ultimately recommending Rachel Pemberton, who had the technical skills and people skills to do the job right. My last day was January 3rd, 2025. Helen organized a small reception. Nathaniel gave a polished talk, 3 weeks later, my phone rang, an unfamiliar number. Fiona Walsh? My name is Robert Kensington. I'm an attorney representing Hartwell Manufacturing. I need to discuss an urgent matter regarding your licensing agreements. Would you be available Monday morning? My stomach dropped. What kind of urgent matter? I'd prefer to discuss it in person. We agreed on a coffee shop. Monday morning, Robert Kensington was a partner at a large Columbus law firm, impeccably dressed. Miss Walsh, I'm going to be direct. 4 days ago, Hartwell Manufacturing's primary operational systems experienced complete failure. Production is offline, inventory systems are inaccessible. The company is dead in the water. I felt cold. What happened? The failure is connected to your licensing agreements. specifically to license expiration. That's impossible. I resigned voluntarily. The licenses don't expire under voluntary resignation. He pulled out my termination letter from May. On May 14th, 2024, you were terminated by Nathaniel Blackwood and Lloyd Hutchinson. That termination was not approved by a 2/3 board vote, which means all licenses expired immediately. But I didn't accept that termination. The board voted against it. I continued working 8 months before resigning voluntarily. The company's position was that the board vote was merely consultation. Nathaniel issued the termination in his capacity as CEO. You continuing to work was treated as temporary arrangement, not reversal of termination. That's insane. I received paychecks. I had full access. I resigned voluntarily with proper notice. I agree this is legally ambiguous. But here's the problem. Your licensing agreements contain automatic enforcement mechanisms, code-level verification that checks employment status. When you left in January, those systems performed their final check. According to company records, your last official status change was the May termination, never formally reversed. The systems expired the licenses. My systems, operating exactly as designed but based on corrupted data. The solution is simple. Correct that status in the system, and licenses should reactivate. He shook his head. The license verification isn't just a status check, it's cryptographic validation tied to active employment. Once expired, licenses can't simply reactivate. They would need to be reissued. By me, I said slowly. By you. Mr. Kensington, explain exactly what systems are affected. He pulled out a list. As I read it, my blood pressure rose. Everything. Every piece of custom code, every integration, every module, all locked. What is the company asking for? They want you to reissue the licenses. Immediately. They'll pay whatever licensing fees are appropriate, but they need systems operational. Every day of downtime costs approximately $300,000. $300,000 per day. 4 days meant $1.2 million in losses. I need to think about this and consult my own attorney. Of course, but please understand the urgency. This company employs 800 people. Most had nothing to do with decisions that led to this. They're good people, and right now they're sitting idle. He was right. This wasn't about Nathaniel or Lloyd's incompetence. It was about Margaret. I called my attorney, Sharon Weinstein. I explained everything and emailed the contracts. She called back that evening. Fiona, you're in an incredibly strong legal position. The agreements are airtight. The company terminated you without proper board approval, triggering expiration. You're under no obligation to reissue them. You could demand any price. The leverage is entirely on your side. Sharon, what should I do? That's not a legal question. That's personal. What outcome do you want? What did I want? Part of me wanted revenge. But another part, shaped by my parents' diner, by years of building systems for people, knew that revenge against executives hurt everyone else more. I want fair compensation for the value of what I created. I want acknowledgement that my systems were valuable, not ancient junk. And I want to make sure this company doesn't collapse because of 2 idiots. Then we calculate a fair market licensing fee based on the value those systems provide and draft a new agreement. What's fair market value? Based on revenue, the cost of alternatives they tried, and current downtime costs. I'd estimate $3 to $6 million for a perpetual license. The enterprise software they bought cost $8.7 million, and it doesn't work nearly as well. Exactly, you're not overcharging. You're asking for reasonable compensation for extraordinary value. We worked out details. A one-time payment of $4.1 million for perpetual, irrevocable licenses. Less than the failed enterprise software, but enough to sting. The next morning, I called Robert Kensington. I'm prepared to reissue the licenses. A one-time licensing fee of $4.1 million for perpetual rights. Silence, then, Miss Walsh, that's a substantial sum. Your client is losing $300,000 per day. The enterprise software they purchased cost $8.7 million, and doesn't work. 4.1 million for systems that are the only thing standing between them and complete collapse is more than fair. I'll present this to leadership and the board. They have 24 hours. After that, the price increases by $200,000 per day. By evening, Kensington called back. The board had approved the fee. They wanted to negotiate payment terms, spreading it over years. Sharon and I countered, $2 million upfront, the rest over 12 months with penalty clauses if payments were late. They agreed. Contracts were signed within 3 days. On Friday, I received a wire transfer for $2 million, and I reactivated the licenses. I drove to Hartwell one last time and met with Rachel Pemberton. She was exhausted. Fiona, thank God. I've been trying to understand your code, but it's so complex. We sat in the server room and I walked her through reactivation. It took 4 hours, but by late afternoon, systems were coming back online. Production scheduling first, then inventory management, warehouse systems, quality control, shipping logistics. One by one, Hartwell Manufacturing's operational infrastructure came back to life. Rachel watched with awe. I've been studying your architecture for 2 months. The way everything integrates, handles exceptions. Fiona, this is brilliant work. Brilliant work, not ancient junk. Take care of it, I told her. Not just the code, but the people using it. That's the secret. Technology is only as good as the humans it serves. I left That's my story. The CIO fired me, called my logic ancient junk, and didn't know that my license would expire when I was terminated without a board vote. The company got a $4.1 million invoice and paid every penny. The licensing agreements I negotiated 25 years ago weren't about greed. They were about protection, about ensuring that the value I created was recognized. When Lloyd called my work ancient junk, he revealed how little he understood about technology, about value, about the difference between shiny and new versus tested and reliable. My systems weren't ancient junk. They were mature, refined, battle-tested solutions that had served a growing company for more than 2 decades. The fact that they were subsequently worth $4.1 million proved the point. You don't pay millions for junk. You pay millions for critical infrastructure you can't operate without. For companies, value your people, especially the quiet ones building critical infrastructure while everyone else chases the next shiny trend. For executives, understand what you have before you tear it apart in the name of modernization. For workers, protect your intellectual property, negotiate fair terms, and never let anyone convince you that experience is irrelevance. For 23 years, I measured my worth by my salary and title. When that was threatened, it shook something fundamental. The licensing agreements forced a different conversation. Not what is the company willing to pay me, but what is my work actually worth in the market? The answer was millions. That knowledge changed me. I don't measure my worth by external validation anymore. I know what I'm capable of. I know the value I bring. And I know that the right people will recognize it, while the wrong people will call it ancient junk right up until the moment they desperately need it. If this resonated with you, if stories about standing firm and protecting your work matter to you, I hope you'll subscribe. We're working toward 5,000 subscribers, people who appreciate honest stories about integrity, value, and standing your ground. Hit that subscribe button and let's keep this conversation